They were not ordinary men. They were warriors who left behind wealth, family names, and even their very lives in exchange for something greater. The Templars carried a code so severe it shaped every word, every gesture, every battle. It wasn't philosophy written in books. It was iron law, obey it or die. This code turned mortal men into eternal legends, remembered even today as the very definition of discipline, faith, and courage. And you need to hear this. Without a code, you're just another lost man. With a code, you become timeless. The Templars took vows of obedience, chastity, and poverty. They rose before the sun, trained, prayed, stood guard, and faced bloody battles. Why? Because their code did not allow them to live for themselves, but for something greater. Now look at our own time. How many men can't go a single day without surrendering to gluttony, laziness, lies, or instant pleasure? While the Templars mastered body and mind, the modern man is ruled by every impulse. They marched into war with their chests bared. We stumble at the sight of criticism, rejection, or a simple disappointment. Here's the truth. If you were forced to live under the Templar rule, you probably wouldn't last a week. The Templar Code. An ordinary man drifts through life. Without discipline, without purpose, he is carried away by the winds of desire and circumstance. But the Templars were not like that. They were forged by a code so rigid it became the very foundation of their existence. This code did not bend to emotions, opinions, or convenience. It was law. There was no space to trade principles for comfort. It was live or die for what they had sworn. The vow of obedience demanded complete submission to the order. The vow of poverty crushed pride, for nothing they owned was truly theirs. The vow of chastity disciplined even the most intimate desires, and the vow of courage set them free in the face of death. This was not religious theory, but an invisible sword cutting straight through the heart and character of every knight. They did not belong to themselves. They belonged to the code. They belonged to the cause. The code regulated every detail of life, the simplicity of their clothes, the frugality of their meals, the austerity of their speech. They could not give in to luxury, to excess, to pride. There was no place for vanity or self-indulgence. Every action was an exercise in constant vigilance. Even the way they mounted a horse, the way they held a sword, the discipline of night watches, everything was shaped by the rule. And here lies the truth. It is this absolute discipline that separates the ordinary man from the legendary one. A man without a code is like a house without a foundation. He collapses at the first storm. But a man with a code builds walls against his impulses and a fortress against the chaos of life. What made the Templars eternal was not only the strength of their swords, but the certainty that they would not bend. You can defeat a man who fears losing, but you cannot defeat a man who has already given himself fully to a code stronger than life itself. Discipline and renunciation. The modern man fears loss of status, comfort, pleasures. The Templars, on the other hand, began with renunciation. Upon entering the order, they left behind family, wealth, and even their own names. They no longer belonged to themselves. Gold, power, personal glory, everything was abandoned. What remained was only the code and the mission. That choice freed them from the invisible chains that keep men on their knees today. Addiction, insatiable desire, the endless hunger for approval. Templar discipline wasn't occasional, it was daily. They rose before the sun to pray, train, and prepare. Each day was lived as war, even when no enemy was in sight. The greater war was against themselves, to master the body, to dominate the mind, to keep faith alive. While ordinary men sought pleasure and comfort, they pursued obedience and silence. It wasn't about erasing desires, but placing them under strict reins. The body was a servant, not a master. This renunciation forged men of iron. They did not fight to conquer lands or women. They fought to keep a vow, to protect their brothers, to guard their faith. And here lies the lesson. True discipline is not doing what you like, but doing what must be done, even when every part of your body screams against it. The undisciplined man is a slave to his own flesh. He eats what he shouldn't, speaks what he shouldn't, lies with who he shouldn't, and wastes the time he doesn't have. He lives like a beggar, surrendering to the crumbs of momentary pleasure. The disciplined man, however, becomes master of himself. He may lose external battles, but he will never be defeated within. The Templars were feared because no distraction could turn them aside. Discipline was visible in the silence of their march, the rigidity of their combat, the coldness with which they embraced death. Nothing in them was weak. Nothing in them was negotiable. That is why their name still echoes through history, because they proved that true freedom is born from discipline, honor, word, and blood. In the time of the Templars, a man's word was worth more than his life. When a knight gave his word, it was not a social agreement. It was a covenant before God, his brothers, and the code. Breaking it was worse than falling in battle, for it meant dying in dishonor. Honor was the backbone of the order. Without it, there was no brotherhood, no trust, no unity. Picture an army where each soldier doubts the other, where no one can be trusted to hold his ground. That army is defeated before the battle even begins. The Templars knew this. That is why a promise was law and dishonor was death in life. They understood that trust between brothers was worth more than all the gold carried by their enemies. And honor was not limited to the order itself. Outside of it, the Templars were feared because they never retreated from their vows. An enemy knew. If a knight swore to fight to the end, he would fight to the end. If he swore to protect, he would protect until his last breath. This created a reputation sharper than any blade. The word of a Templar was his invisible weapon, just as lethal as his sword. Today, however, we live in a time where a man's word is worth almost nothing. He promises and does not keep. He throws commitments to the wind. He swears love, then abandons it at the first difficulty. He makes vows and breaks them as if they were paper. And that is why we see so many broken men, because without honor, without word, there is no structure strong enough to bear the weight of life. The true strength of a man is not in his muscles or his weapons, but in his integrity. When his word is firm, even his enemies respect him. When his word is weak, even his friends despise him. The Templars chose to die in combat, but they would never die as traitors to their code. That is the lesson. A man who does not honor his word is already defeated, even if he still breathes. Courage and eternity. Courage is not the absence of fear. The Templars knew this better than anyone. They felt the chill of death, the weight of the enemy, the uncertainty of every battle. Yet the code demanded they remain standing. And so they did. Their courage wasn't born of impulse or pride, but of a solid conviction. Their lives were not their own. They had been given to something greater. They rode into war, knowing many would never return. Still, they marched in silence, heavy armor upon their shoulders, shields raised, white crosses upon their chests. Templar courage was not the roar of theatrical bravado. It was the calm of men who had already decided that if necessary, they would die honoring their code. And that calm froze their enemies in place. What army can defeat men who have already made peace with death? Their courage was seen in every daily choice, keeping watch through the night in silence, enduring hunger, cold, sickness, endless marches. Courage is facing the grind without complaint. It is keeping faith alive when everything around you is falling apart. The sword in battle was only the final act of men who had already conquered fear in countless smaller wars within. Today, we confuse courage with impulsiveness. We think courage is showing off online, shouting the loudest, pretending to be strong when it's only vanity. True courage is paying the price for what you believe. It is standing firm when everyone else runs. It is carrying the weight of responsibility even when the pressure feels unbearable. The Templars teach us that fear never truly leaves, but it can be defeated by loyalty to the code. That is the kind of courage that turns men into legends. Not because they gained riches or fame, but because they lived in such a way that even death could not defeat them. Eternity belongs to those who dare to live with courage until the very end. You don't live in the 12th century. There are no castles to storm, no crusades to fight. But the essence of the Templar Code still matters, perhaps more now than ever. Modern life tries to turn men into passive consumers, forever chasing the next pleasure, the next distraction. If you want to stand apart, you'll need a code as unshakable as theirs. Start with your word. If you promise, keep it, even at great cost. Build a reputation as a man who never goes back. Discipline your body. Rise early, train, eat with purpose. Don't give yourself to vices. Master your desires before they devour you. Renounce excess. Don't live for comfort, live for purpose. And above all, practice courage. Face hard conversations, painful decisions, narrow paths. The world does not need more fragile men. It needs men whose code is stronger than chaos. If you apply only 3 of these principles each day, an unshakable word, discipline of the body, and courage in the face of fear, you will already be walking the path that separates the common from the legendary. The Templars never sought fame. They did not desire applause. Many never even had their names remembered. But what endures to this day is not their individuality. It is the code they carried to the end. And that is what makes a man a legend, living for principles greater than himself. You can choose to keep living like a shadow, surrendered to comfort and excuses. Or you can choose to rise, forge a code, and follow it without compromise. The choice is simple, but the road is brutal. Few endure it, which is why few are remembered. Here is the truth. The world does not bow to opinions, but to men who remain standing when everyone else falls. The question left for you is this: what is your code? Because without it, you've already lost the war before it begins.